5 months ago, the Sacramento Kings trading for Ja Morant was a fun, hypothetical offseason conversation to help kill the time. But now in early November, it may be a little more real than even we realized. But will it still cost a King's ransom to bring Ja to Sacramento? Joel Mullinax from the Locked On Grizzlies podcast joins me again here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And when I first had Joe from Locked On Grizzlies on to talk about Ja Morant, the takeaway from that conversation was pretty simple. If Ja were to ever become available, and if the Sacramento Kings were ever to have a realistic shot of bringing Ja to Sacramento, they would need to put a pretty hefty offer on the table that the Grizzlies would have a hard time saying no to. But since then, Ja Morant has had some more off-the-court issues, was suspended for a game by the Grizzlies for things that he said in the media, clearly has a disconnect with the new Grizzlies coaching staff, is not too keen on the direction of the organization right now. Context that leads some outside of Memphis to believe that if Ja were to be available, maybe his price tag has gone down a little bit. Well, spoiler alert on this podcast, as you're going to hear from Joe Mullinax, host of Locked On Grizzlies, from his perspective and from the Memphis perspective, that's not the case at all. So here is Joe and I talking through the situation with Ja in Memphis right now and what it would take from the Sacramento Kings specifically to get the Grizzlies to strongly consider trading their star to Sacramento. Back in June, early June, myself and Joe Mullinax from Locked On Grizzlies decided to come together for a little hypothetical, hey, what if Ja Morant became available and the Sacramento Kings were to acquire and trading him? It was a totally hypothetical, fun conversation to kill time during the offseason. Here we are now in early November, and there's starting to be a little bit of smoke to this conversation. Drama happening in Memphis between Ja, the coaching staff, the organization. Suddenly Ja could become more available. And here are the Sacramento Kings as a potential favorite to bring the star point guard in. So Joe is back with me here on Locked On Kings. Let's try and make sense of this, Joe, and see how much has changed from hypothetical June to potential reality November. The first thing I got to ask, though, and first thing we got to talk about is the drama that's happening around Ja and the coaching staff. And I don't know how much is blown out of proportion versus how much is real from the outside perspective, but do you expect that or think that should have any sort of negative impact on the trade value of Ja Morant in any hypothetical trade conversation? Because it sounds like, according to reports and conversations out there from national media members, that Ja's price tag may not be as high as some would expect it to be.
That's fine that they can feel that way. And thanks for having me on, Matt. Always nice to be on Locked On Kings. The value is still there for Memphis for a variety of reasons. For number one reason, Chris Vernon said on the Zach Lowe podcast over on The Ringer, he put it exactly right. Ja Morant puts asses in seats. That's the first and foremost biggest understanding point here is to the Sacramento Kings or to the Los Angeles Lakers, to the New York Knicks, everywhere coast to coast in between. Ja Morant might just be another good basketball player who's got baggage. Ja Morant is the biggest star in the history of the Memphis Grizzlies, period, point blank. There's been greater Grizzlies, like I would put Zach Randolph, Marc Gasol. Those guys have had greater Grizzlies careers to this point than Ja. Ja's close. But those guys may still be in front. That might be a minority opinion. There's a lot of folks that are going to say Ja's the greatest Grizzly ever right now. And the same audience that judged the Grizzlies for retiring Tony Allen's jersey and didn't understand then why Memphis would retire TA's jersey, the same exact argument is going to be made here. You don't understand what Ja Morant means to Memphis, what he means to the Grizzlies organization at large. The Grizzlies would be foolish to part with him for anything less than a king's ransom. If Desmond Bane was the starting point in terms of what these guys might be valued at, the value is higher with Ja Morant even in his current state because of what he's capable of and what he means to the city, even in the current situation.
And Joe, I know you understand that the outside perspective would be teams are going to look at this as an opportunity to try and potentially buy low on an asset that's been a little bit in fluctuation, Ja, with injuries and off-court issues and stuff like that. But people forget how good he was that first couple of years and his playoff debut and how great he was a handful of years ago. So there's certainly still a lot of value there. But people are naturally going to try and take any scenario and try and buy low on it. And then, of course, the Grizzlies would then counter in any conversation and say, we have no problem walking away and having Ja Morant continue to be a Grizzly and continue to be on our roster. So to get kind of your perspective on that, in your opinion, then, in your mind, like that's not an idle threat. Like the Grizzlies would be just fine and feel that even with what has happened so far in the early parts of this season, it can be water under the bridge, and the Grizzlies and Ja Morant can proceed as if nothing's changed and nothing's happened if trade talks don't come to fruition.
We live in an instant gratification, I know you know this, 24-hour news cycle world, right? I'm not saying anything you don't already understand in your line of work. The reality of the situation is people have forgotten how good Ja Morant is, and I'll do you one better. They forgot how good Ja Morant was the last 10 to 15 games of the regular season 7 months ago when Taylor Jenkins was fired and interim coach at the time, Tuomas Isalo, took over. And Zach Edey was on the court, the 7'4", 290-pound big setting these screens. That's something that context is hard in 2025. Zach Edey's not on the court, right? Scottie Pippen Jr. is not on the court. Brandon Clark's not on the court. Ty Jerome's not on the court. There are numerous key cogs to what this Grizzlies rotation is supposed to be that are not currently playing. So we have no idea what this Grizzlies team looks like because they haven't played together yet. The guys that are actually supposed to be on the court, Jerome and Edey in particular. But I'll do even one better beyond that. Other people might try to forget it. I'll never let people forget that Game 3 against the Oklahoma City Thunder in Memphis when Ja Morant had the Grizzlies up 26 points in the first half on the future NBA champions. In no way, shape, or form am I trying to say the Thunder get beat by Memphis in that 7-game series. It probably goes 5. But you'll never be able to convince me that the Thunder make that comeback if Ja Morant stays healthy. And he was the deciding factor in that game. So, you know who doesn't forget that, though? These NBA franchises. They know all of this. So they play the narrative game. They play in the national media. I don't know if I would pay as much as I normally would. It's all negotiations. It's all a ploy. Ja Morant, when he is right, and that's a big when, and that's a big if he is right, is one of the top 20 or so players in the National Basketball Association. And I think he's higher than that. That comes with a price tag. And the Grizzlies would be foolish because of something that Kendrick Perkins says or some other national media member, Carmelo Anthony, the bastion of integrity that Carmelo Anthony is. The idea that these guys think he's down and he's not doing what he's supposed to do. Let's pump the brakes here a little bit. There's another side to this story. Ja Morant's a really good freaking basketball player. Trying to put him on the same level as LaMelo and Zion Williamson, that's not fair. Those guys have not achieved at the level that Ja Morant has. Again, Vernon on that podcast with Zach Lowe, 60% of the time when Ja Morant plays, the Grizzlies win. That's not something you can say about these other troubled stars.
So it's funny you use the term "a king's ransom" is what it would cost, and that's the exact title that I used for our conversation back in June. So it sounds like in your mind, the conversation hasn't really changed over the last 5 months, other than it went from like a fun hypothetical to now there might be a little more truth to it, just given the circumstances and the context of the regular season.
I would say it's no longer a fun hypothetical. It's a sad hypothetical. I still don't think it's an actual real situation. But, Ja Morant, to be asked by my co-host, DeMichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee, DeMichael asked him the question that kind of sparked a lot of this outrage over the last 24 hours. are you still feeling joy or something like that, to paraphrase the question. And Ja said no. Right. And that was DeMichael that asked it. It wasn't a rage clickbait generating question. If you follow the Grizzlies, DeMichael talks about mental health with these guys, especially Ja, a lot these last couple of years. And that's not a clickbaity question. That's a real thing that DeMichael asks about, especially when it comes to Morant. So it's a sad hypothetical, but I still very much think it's a hypothetical because I know we'll talk about this. I don't think the Kings are willing, or any team is willing, to give up what it's going to take to get Morant.
Like I said at the top of the show, this episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Basketball season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for these opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can sometimes be a total headache between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and everything in between, prices that jump right before checkout. It's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in. It's the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. You can use Game Time to grab the best price seats you're going to find out there for Kings and Warriors tomorrow night, or any of these 5 games over this homestand. And I love that what you see is what you pay on Game Time. When you first select your seats, that is the price. There's no hidden fees, $30, $40 of whatever thrown on top of it in that final checkout screen. Plus, you can see exactly what your view is going to look like from your seat, the most accurate seat views you're going to find anywhere else. And they have zone deals that are a game changer. You pick the section, Game Time picks your seats, and you save big. You can even find NBA tickets for under $25. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Perfect lead in, because when I reached out to you to have this conversation again, you essentially sent me a starting point, which didn't surprise me at all. It's Malik Monk, it's DeMar DeRozan, those two to make the money work. And then it's 3 first-round picks. And the first of the 3, no surprise, is the 2026 first-round pick. And I know that is going to be a point of contention with, if there's anything that the Sacramento Kings have going for them right now in this confusing era of, or plan, or whatever they're trying to do, it's the fact that they have control over their future draft compensation with the addition of like a Spurs pick and a Timberwolves pick. And this season's not trending in the best direction. They're 2-5 right now. I think they have the 6th best odds as of right now to win the draft lottery. So moving on from the 2026 pick is going to give the Kings naturally a lot of pause, might give Kings fans a lot of pause. Although there's the other side of the fan base that goes, if you go out and trade for Ja Morant, the expectation would be adding Ja, your team would be better, hopefully make the playoffs. Now you're outside of the lottery, so that 2026 pick doesn't mean as much. But Joe, in your mind, one of the things you said when we were talking about it, said you like Memphis could not stomach any conversation without that immediate gratification pick and a potential lottery pick being included in this deal, because Memphis isn't looking to recoup the loss of Ja Morant 3-4 years from now. They need to start recouping it now.
The city of Memphis is not going to suffer a fool, if that makes sense. The reality of the situation is this is probably the most pissed off Memphis has ever been at Ja Morant, and that includes the gun outrage or faux outrage nationally. And Memphians, for the most part, didn't care as much about that. But on Friday, when he quiet quit and didn't really give maximum effort against the Lakers in that cup game, that's going to piss off Memphians. That's going to piss off Grizzlies fans, is when you're not giving your best effort. This is the most mad I think Grizzlies fans have been at Ja. The reality of the situation is this. You move on from the biggest star in franchise history, there better be a plan. If you go out there and say, oh, well, we think Zach LaVine might still be a good basketball player and maybe he can be the second fiddle to Jaren Jackson Jr., I don't think anybody's buying that. So in my logic with the trade that you mentioned a moment ago, I'm guessing DeRozan is, of the 3 bigger contracts, that's the guy you'd be most willing to move on from. Is that fair to assume?
Yes, and I think that with DeRozan's next year being partially guaranteed too, if it doesn't work out for a team like Memphis, you can kind of wipe the slate clean a little bit earlier than committing to 2 years of LaVine.
I also like DeRozan in this scenario because he can be a veteran presence. The Grizzlies have been looking for that desperately. It's one of the reasons they went out and tried the Marcus Smart trade. Didn't work out. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is a good vet, but he's not the caliber of player that DeMar DeRozan is. So I think DeRozan can come in and be that second fiddle to Jaren and keep you competitive. I don't think the Grizzlies make the playoffs by any stretch, but maybe they eke out the 10th seed and make a play-in appearance. I think that's possible. I think that you start with DeRozan because that's the worst of the three in terms of the big contracts. Malik Monk has been part of trade rumors forever and always, so I don't think Kings fans are going to be really mad about that departure, especially if it results in Ja Morant arriving.
Fans would be. I don't think the organization would, but fans very much love Malik.
Fair enough. Touche. So the organization wouldn't care. So that leads you to draft pick compensation. The 2026 pick is vital because that's where the direction comes in. You can sell people, because you got to remember the Grizzlies have control of that Phoenix Suns pick. It's kind of hard to understand in terms of who exchanges what. There's lots of different levels. But the Grizzlies could potentially, if they don't make the playoffs, and if the Sacramento Kings, in this hypothetical, make this trade and they don't make the playoffs, there's a possibility that Memphis has 2 or 3 lottery picks in what could be one of the best drafts of this quarter century so far. That would be a direction. That is the Grizzlies saying, look at us. We have a clear path. Jaren, who does everything right, he's going to be the leader. He's going to be the guy that shows these guys how to do things the right way. We're going to be young, but we're going to be exciting. There's a clear direction. If you're making a Ja Morant trade for the sake of making a trade, like flipping troubled stars, like Zion for Ja, that would be met with a universal chorus of boos in Memphis. That's one problem for another. You have to have some sort of set direction. There has to be a reality check. Moving on from Ja Morant makes you're going to take a step or two back. You have to do it. Nobody is trading Ja Morant for an upgrade of talent in that position. That's not reality. But what you can do is reset your organization in a potentially historic draft and allow for young talent to come back into the city. And that is how you're supposed to build in Memphis. Free agents aren't choosing Memphis. More free agents choose Sacramento than choose Memphis, Tennessee. That's the reality of the situation. You have to build through trade and you have to build through the draft. You bring in a player like DeRozan who's going to be a pro in this hypothetical. You draft a bunch of young guys. To be honest with you, I would keep DeRozan. I would keep it fully guaranteed and let him be the vet that develops and helps these guys find their way in the NBA. That is how I would approach it if I was trading Ja Morant. But to me, this wouldn't happen because I don't see the Kings giving up that pick for the exact reason I just outlined.
Well, let's say the Kings and Grizzlies are sitting across each other from a table, and the Kings have agreed to put DeRozan, have agreed to put Malik and that 2026 first on the table. The question then becomes, okay, what more do you need on top of it? Because at that point, if the Kings are already sweating, and Joe, you're not talking about one piece of draft compensation. You're talking and expecting multiple pieces of draft compensation. And I think a lot of people are going to use the Desmond Bane deal over the summertime as kind of a barometer for this as well. Same way we use the Rudy Gobert trade as a barometer for so many years for some reason. How much more on top of that do you think would the Memphis Grizzlies, one, demand, and two, be willing to take? Because those numbers have to be different. You can't say it has to be 4 or we're not budging. So how much are they demanding, and then how much are they willing to go down to?
I think they start with demanding 4 in addition to the 2026. I think they asked for 3 more. If I were Sacramento, I would say no to that because you are taking on the risk here in a variety of ways. I think that the Grizzlies would be wise to agree to 3. The 2026 would be that has to be there. And then I think in our conversation, I mentioned you guys have picks from the Timberwolves, I believe, and the Spurs later on down the road.
2031 Timberwolves, 2027 Spurs first.
Those would be the 2. Because again, if the Kings are successful or not successful, it protects Sacramento in the long run. They hold on to those picks if they haven't already traded them, right? I didn't do that much research into the future draft picks. But if the Kings have that 2027, that 2031, say the Ja Morant trade is a terrible failure, again, you move on from Malik Monk and DeMar DeRozan, you still have Sabonis, you still have Levine, you still have other top pieces that you can build around. And the picks that you moved on from were picks that you weren't planning on having anyway. So it's a way of trying to increase your ceiling without really completely destroying your floor. I would say the 2026 has to be there, and then I'd be willing to take 2 first after that. Because again, not all 2 trades are the same. You can't say that Ja has to be worth 4 picks because Bane was worth 4 picks. DeRozan and Monk are unquestionably better than Kentavious Caldwell Pope and Cole Anthony were. So the value is a sliding scale there, right? Ja Morant is better than Bane, but those two players are also better. For me personally, it lands at the 2026 plus the 2 other firsts that are not controlled by the Kings. And I think that makes it more attractive to Sacramento because, again, whether it works or doesn't work, either way, your back is kind of covered.
And I'll add kind of a side branch to this conversation, too, because these names have come up. G.G. Jackson, Jalen Wells. We know about Jalen very well here in Sacramento, a local boy. But not both of those involved in the conversation, but one of the two. We don't have to get too far into the weeds of how that would change the deal necessarily, but how willing would the Grizzlies be to include one or either one of those guys in the deal?
Anybody that listens to Locked On Grizzlies knows I'm trying to throw John Conchar in that trade because I'm trying to get rid of John Conchar every chance I get. But I think Jalen Wells, the Grizzlies don't make the Bane trade without some level of confidence that Wells can do the things, or at least some of the things, as a three-point shooter in particular, that Bane was able to do. That hasn't fleshed out yet this season, but for a variety of reasons that we've already discussed, it's early to make that takeaway. Wells was an all-rookie NBA team member. You could argue he would have been Rookie of the Year if he didn't get injured. I think they want to hold on to Wells. G.G. Jackson is interesting because you mentioned how fans love Monk, but the organization doesn't. Fans love G.G. Jackson, but the organization does not. Players like John Conchar, players that are not as talented as G.G., don't have the ceiling that G.G. has. They are starting to get run in front of G.G. Jackson. He is not in the rotation in Memphis right now. So while I might be a G.G. Jackson fan and I might want to see him get those reps, clearly the front office and especially the coaching staff, it was true of the Taylor Jenkins coaching staff and it's true of the Tuomas Isalo coaching staff now, they don't see that value in G.G. at the moment. So if that was something that sweetened the pot and got Sacramento to include a 4th first, or even got them to the point where one of those firsts that we mentioned a moment ago was a Sacramento first instead of a Spurs or a Timberwolves one, I don't think the Grizzlies would think twice to do it because they don't see G.G. the way that others do in the fan base.
Joe, real quick, we'll wrap up with this. You've covered Ja's entire career. You also know the small market perspective of Memphis, just like the small market perspective of Sacramento. These stars don't come around too often unless you draft well, and that's been a big if for the Sacramento Kings over the years. How, put yourself in the other perspective, put yourself in Sacramento's perspective. How comfortable would you be including 3 first rounders in that much of a chunk of your future? Essentially, if not your future, a chunk of the assets that you got in a De'Aaron Fox trade that they just went through a handful of months ago. How willing would you be to put that on the line in order to bring Ja to Sacramento?
It's a test of your organization and your culture. Right. And I know that's kind of been questioned in Sacramento over the last couple of weeks and months, the coaching choice and whether he should have stayed on as the coach and those sorts of things. How much do you believe in the Sacramento Kings culture? Because Ja Morant's going to come in and he's not a culture killer. I want to stress that. He's a human being that gets frustrated. He's made mistakes. He is not someone that is a coach killer or rips apart cultures. That's not this guy. But if you don't have a structure in place that is going to be conducive to him having success, he is going to be a guy that is not going to make accountability his strong suit. That's the reality. And if you don't have a coaching staff that's prepared for that, if you don't have a locker room, in the case of Levine and Sabonis in this hypothetical, if they're not able to be those guys that stand up and kind of say, hey, Ja, you're a bigger star than us, but this is how we do things here. If that's not capable or possible, I would not recommend making the trade. If you have something that you believe in Sacramento and you think Morant's talent will buy into how you're doing things, then he's going to get you to where you want to go if your goal is being a competitive regular season team that is able to win a playoff series. Ja Morant has shown that he's capable of that when he's at his best. If that's the goal, you make the trade.
Joe, we'll see if the smoke becomes fire. Thank you, my friend. I know you'll keep talking about this from all hypothetical trade scenarios over on Locked On Grizzlies. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, Matt.
Locked On Kings is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than on FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comeback, so you can keep playing along with the action. Plus, you can even combine all of your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at an even bigger payout. It keeps every game, no matter who's playing, more exciting, especially when your team is the one making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So put $5 on the easiest bet that you can find out there. $5, put it on it. Even if the payout isn't great for that bet, it doesn't matter. You get $300 in bonus bets on top of that. Now you can really start to have some fun on FanDuel. So head to FanDuel.com, sign up, and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. In other Sacramento Kings news today, it became official. The team announced that Precious Achiuwa is now a King, 6'8" center. Most recently played for the New York Knicks, averaged 6 points and just shy of 6 rebounds a game for New York last season. Of course, the Knicks had a really, really good season last year. I know that there are mixed emotions about this move. The negativity with this move primarily comes from the Kings moving on from Isaac Jones in order to bring Precious in. We'll talk about that in just a second. But with Precious specifically, I mean, the Kings just needed center depth help. And while Precious is still undersized for the center position, he's 6'8". He's a very good athlete, has a good nose for the basketball in terms of rebounding. So is someone that's definitely going to help the Kings on the glass. That's been a big issue for them to start this season, and gives the Kings a little bit of rim protection. If you want to go to my Twitter account right now, at MattGeorgeSack, I posted about a 90-second video of just some highlights, some of the best moments of Precious with the New York Knicks last season. And that's just part of there's like 7 minutes worth of highlights and moments from Precious just last season with the New York Knicks. And a lot of those highlights, you'll see how he protects the rim. And we all know that the Sacramento Kings need more rim protection. It'll be interesting to see what they view Precious's role and spot in the rotation to be. If I had to have my guess, it would be the backup center spot. I know Drew Eubanks has done better recently. His last 2 games, I think he's shooting like 9 of 10 from the field. But Drew has not been able to hold down those minutes with Domantas Sabonis off the floor as well as Kings fans and the Kings organization have really hoped. And Maxime Reynaud simply not ready. Max was actually sent down to the G League today to play with the Stockton Kings, so he will be with Stockton for their season opener on Friday, I believe, down in Stockton against the San Diego Clippers. Now, he'll still be working with the main roster, still be practicing with the main roster, everything like that. So it's not like he's been demoted and we haven't seen him, or we won't see him for a long time. This gives Max a good opportunity to show that he is an NBA caliber player, to get some needed playing time, to get some work in that he's simply just not going to get with the main roster, some actual game experience. So this is going to be nothing but a good move for Max Reynaud, but he's not ready. And then Isaac Jones, there's questions about if he can hold down that center position, if he's a center, if he's a 4, he's kind of a tweener in that sense. So the Kings have been needing to bolster their center rotation. And I think Precious Achiuwa does this. So in my mind, his responsibility will simply be hold down the minutes at that 5 spot when Domantas Sabonis is out of the game. Sabonis is going to play 34 to 37, 38 minutes a night. Precious gets the rest of them. However, there are some that believe that you can potentially play the 2 of them together. I have concerns about spacing with the 2 of them playing together. But Precious at 6'8", maybe more of a 4 height, although a lot of people think Domantas Sabonis at 6'11" should be at the 4 spot. I think we're going to primarily see Precious as a backup center, and he's already here in Sacramento, signed his deal, got everything official with Scott Perry earlier today. So all expectations is that he will be good to go for the Kings against the Golden State Warriors tomorrow. Speaking of that, quick note, Malik Monk is back from his personal reasons, so he will be playing for the Kings against the Warriors tomorrow. But Domantas Sabonis potentially will not be playing with his ribs issue. And there was another King that is questionable for that game, and I don't remember off the top of my head. My apologies. I'll look that up as soon as I can. But talking about the negative side of the conversation around this Precious Achiuwa move, it has everything to do with Isaac Jones. And Isaac Jones being an energy guy, a hustle player, he was very impressive for the Sacramento Kings in Summer League. It doesn't surprise me that a vocal portion of the Sacramento Kings fan base is disappointed or upset in the Kings moving on from Isaac. It's important to remember, even though Isaac was a two-way contract that got converted to a full contract, he was not Scott Perry's guy. He was part of the old regime here in Sacramento. So it makes it a little bit easier because Perry doesn't have any sort of attachment to him in that way. That being said, I see a lot of people going, Matt, why wouldn't the Sacramento Kings move on from Dario Saric? He's not playing. Why wouldn't they move on from Doug McDermott? He's barely playing, and he only really gets in during garbage time to put up threes. It's because those two are, one, more established NBA players. You kind of know what they are more than you know what Isaac Jones is, although, of course, Isaac Jones does have untapped upside and untapped potential. But the other thing is contracts, right? Dario Saric specifically, he's a $5 million deal or something like that. That's $5 million that you could potentially use in a trade, whether it's a hypothetical Ja Morant trade or another trade that the Kings want to try and make down the line. So that is a reason to keep Dario Saric around, is to use that money in a deal more than, and it's significantly more money, not by NBA standards, but in our standards, it's significantly more money than what Isaac Jones was making. So I understand Kings fans that are frustrated. I understand if you're one of those people that's like, why would you give up on Isaac Jones? It doesn't make any sense. I don't think IJ, as much as I have enjoyed watching him over the last year and some change, I don't think IJ is worth getting that disappointed about from a player standpoint. That sounds awful to say. Really, really good guy. But I mean, in Scott Perry's mind, he needs to improve this roster. He needs to add a piece right now that will contribute and will help. Precious Achiuwa seems to be a guy that will do that. And Isaac Jones is a developmental project at the end of the bench in a time where the Sacramento Kings aren't really developing those types of players at this point, right? Maxime Reynaud, second-round pick, but he was Scott Perry's pick. That's why he's developing. Neek Clifford is also a rookie who is developing, but Neek is at a position of need for Sacramento and is part of the Kings rotation, good enough to be part of the Kings rotation, a first-round pick. So those guys are different. I mean, even Devin Carter is on the outs in terms of a developmental project at this point, but more in than Isaac Jones was. So it's disappointing, I guess, from that standpoint, but losing Isaac Jones, I think, hurts the fan base that liked him more than it actually hurts the Sacramento Kings from a basketball standpoint, to put it bluntly, which is why Scott Perry felt that he was the right guy to waive in order to get this move done. I want to hear from you. Your thoughts on the Precious Achiuwa addition, waiving Isaac Jones, your thoughts on a potential Ja Morant trade. Would you include all those assets that Joe was talking about to go out and get Ja Morant? Is this the right move for the Sacramento Kings to make? I spoke about this on social media a little bit. Also spoke about it on yesterday's Locked On Kings podcast. I personally don't think so. I don't think using the assets that you just acquired, what few assets, draft compensation-wise, you acquired for De'Aaron Fox, and using that to go out and get Ja Morant, plus additional assets like your own 2026 first, if not more, to get it, I just don't think is the right move for this team to make right now. I don't understand why the Kings would have any interest in Ja Morant if they didn't have any interest in Trae Young. Two very different players, but kind of the same caliber of situation with both those guys. And I know Trae wasn't too appealing to Scott Perry, let's say. So I question whether Ja will be equally as appealing, but who knows? We'll have to wait and see. You weigh in on that. I'd love to hear your thoughts at MattGeorgeSack on Twitter. You can reach me there. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Appreciate your support. Can't wait to have you join me on tomorrow's episode after the Kings and Warriors game. If you're going to the game, I, of course, will be there inside the Golden One Center. Come by, top of section 105. That is the media seating area. You can come chat with me there at any time. Would love to say hi to you there. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.